I'm so glad to see so many of you here for what is our second Creative Classroom talk in a new series. I am Janine Oakman. I'm Associate Director of Education here at the Contemporary Jewish Museum, and I'm really excited about our two speakers tonight. But first, I want to share with you a little bit about the Creative Classroom. The Creative Classroom is a new series of talks that pairs an academic or a scholar with an artist or someone else from the creative field to explore the changing nature of education. Here at the museum, we've been exploring what makes a transformational educational experience. And this bringing together of two seemingly different professionals is part of that experiment in education. Here at the museum, our mission is to make the diversity of the Jewish experience relevant for a 21st century audience. So what does that have to do with bringing a psychologist and an artist together for a talk? Well, there is a tradition in Judaism called Havruta, which brings two people together to study a traditional text through discussion and through dialogue, sometimes through debate. So we decided to tackle the field of education in a similar way by bringing people together to have a conversation with the idea that two minds are better than one. We also have a new exhibition series by the same name, Havruta, that is about to open a new rotation just on the other side of this wall. It opens on January 22nd, so come back and check it out. I wanted to share a little bit about the connection between our two speakers. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, has had reverberations that have touched educators, parents, coaches, and beyond, provoking a reconsideration of how we give praise and how we cultivate success. And artist Michael Light is someone who I might characterize as a lifelong learner, having spent decades exploring topics ranging from the American landscape to the lunar landscape to nuclear testing, all through photography, often done from an airplane. Tonight, both speakers will share their own work, and then we'll bring them together to discuss, based on their own experience, what might be used to help cultivate creativity. And of course, there'll be time for all of you to ask questions. And I also want to let you know that for tonight's event, we are partnering with Millennium School, a new independent middle school that's opening in San Francisco in fall of 2016. And Millennium School is applying groundbreaking research from Carol Dweck and other scholars to reimagine the middle school experience for the 21st century. And if you want to learn more, you can visit millenniumschool.org. So I'm going to introduce both of our panelists more formally, and then we'll begin the talks. Carol S. Dweck, PhD, is one of the world's leading researchers in the field of motivation and is the Lewis and Virginia Eaton Professor of Psychology at Stanford. Her research highlights the critical role of mindsets in student achievement and shows how interventions can affect mindsets. She's won many awards for her research and its applications and has been elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences as a fellow and to the National Academy of Sciences. Her work has been prominently featured in almost every major news publication and on numerous TV and radio shows. Her best-selling book, Mindset, has been widely acclaimed and has been translated into over 20 languages. Her book is available here at the CJM tonight, and she has a new TED Talk available on the TED website. Michael Light is a photographer and a bookmaker focused on the environment and its relationship to contemporary American culture. For the past 15 years, Light has aerially photographed settled and unsettled areas of the American space, pursuing themes of mapping, vertigo, human impact on the land, and various aspects of geologic time. A private pilot and a Guggenheim Fellow, he released his third volume in the series Lake Las Vegas, Black Mountain this past fall. Light is also known for his globally published archival works, including Full Moon and 100 Suns. Internationally exhibited, his work has been collected by the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the New York Public Library, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, among others. And I'm really pleased to announce that Michael's work will appear in our summer exhibition called Night Begins the Day. So I'd like to invite Carol up.
I always start with my favorite quote, always, by Benjamin Barber, an eminent political scientist. He says, "I don't divide the world into the weak and the strong, or the successes and the failures. I divide the world into the learners and the non-learners. Why would anyone become a non-learner? We're born with incredible curiosity. Babies are always experimenting. They're addressing the most difficult tasks of a lifetime with tremendous gusto. Yet, just a few years later, many of these same kids look like this, or this, or this. What happened? And many of the things we do when we try to help or motivate kids are turning them into non-learners. So how do we make sure people remain learners? Because learning is at the basis of accomplishment and, I believe, creativity. That's what my work is about. How do we keep people learning? In our work, we've discovered that people hold different mindsets about their basic talents and abilities. In a fixed mindset, people believe their talents and abilities are just fixed traits. You have a certain amount and that's it. But in a growth mindset, people believe that their basic talents and abilities can be developed through hard work, good strategies, good mentorship from others. They don't think everyone's the same, but they believe that everyone can develop. In our work, we've shown repeatedly through dozens of studies now that these mindsets really matter. In many studies, we've measured students' mindsets and then looked at their achievement over time. Here's what happened when we measured students' mindsets, saw whether they thought their intelligence was something fixed or something they could develop, and then we charted their math grades over that difficult middle school, 7th grade transition. And here's what we found. Their grades jumped apart and continued to diverge over 2 years. The only thing that differed were their mindsets. Recently, we studied all the 10th graders in the country of Chile. And look what we found. This is income level. At every single income level, those with a growth mindset on top way outperformed on math and verbal achievement tests, those with a fixed mindset. But the interesting thing is, the poorest kids who had a growth mindset were equivalent to many of the richer kids, much richer kids, who had a fixed mindset. So how do these mindsets work? How does a growth mindset maximize learning? We found that there are several ways that this happens. When kids have a fixed mindset, they follow 3 rules. Because it's fixed, you better make it look good. So 1, never look dumb. 2, don't work hard, because you'll feel or maybe look dumb. And run from difficulty, because mistakes and setbacks mean you're not competent. So you could see how this might undermine learning over time. In a growth mindset, the rules are learn whenever you can, work hard to learn, and learn from mistakes. So a growth mindset not only creates achievement, but creativity is about taking on risks and learning from mistakes. Do you know that that molten chocolate cake that we have come to depend on was a mistake? And when Jean-Georges, the chef, finished yelling at the assistant who had underbaked the cake, he knew he had a great creation. Many, many breakthroughs have come from mistakes or sticking with something that looks like a mistake. Let's look in the brain at how people with fixed and growth mindsets tackle mistakes. And focusing on tackling that mistake and correcting it is shown by that bright red-orange on the right, that's a growth mindset student. Detecting their mistake, processing it, correcting it. The fixed mindset student on the left, nothing is happening. No learning is taking place either. So that whole attitude towards challenges and difficulty, I'm going to argue, undermines not only learning and accomplishment, but creativity too. And in fact, Charlene Namath and our colleagues at Berkeley directly looked at the relationship between mindsets and creativity. They found people who endorsed more of a growth mindset in one study performed better on a task of creativity. In another study, they found that people who endorsed a growth mindset had greater lifetime achievement. But my favorite study was where they oriented people toward a fixed or a growth mindset. They gave them different quotes to read before they went into a creativity task. These quotes were attributed to famous people. This one was attributed to Steve Jobs. So the quote starts, "Most artists and supposed creative types just copy someone else. They adjust, tweak a little, but overall it's just the same thing." Then some people heard this completion, but some people have some inherent quality, fixed mindset, that lets them see the bigger picture and do something truly creative. Other people heard a different ending to this quote, but some people work to a point that lets them see the bigger picture and do something truly creative. Some people got a series of fixed mindset quotes, some growth mindset. Then they went into a creativity task, and look what happened. Those who heard that creativity was the product of sticking to something, thinking about it over periods of time, showed far more creative responses. Now, we have discovered recently it's not just individuals that have mindsets. Organizations, a whole organization, a whole school, a whole company can have a mindset. And we studied this in Fortune 1000 companies. We asked people whether their organization embodied more of a fixed mindset or more of a growth mindset. So, for example, a fixed mindset statement would be, when it comes to being successful, this company believes that people have a certain amount of talent and they can't really do much to change it. The interesting finding was, first of all, people agreed with each other whether they were in a fixed mindset or growth mindset environment. But, it made a big difference. People in the growth mindset environments said far more than those in the fixed mindset environment that their company really supported creativity and innovation. For example, they endorsed much more strongly statements like this: people are encouraged to be innovative in this company. Creativity is welcomed. They said their organizations promoted much more risk-taking, appropriate risk-taking, and that people would back them up if they took a reasonable risk and it didn't pan out. In the fixed mindset organizations, people said, yeah, they talk about risk-taking, innovation, creativity, but if it doesn't work out, the axe falls. And the managers in those organizations, in the growth mindset organizations, said that their workers had so much more potential to become leaders in the company. So how are mindsets fostered? Many different ways that we've studied. First, praise. A growth mindset is fostered, a fixed mindset is fostered by praising intelligence and talent. A growth mindset is fostered by praising the process that children or adults engage in, their hard work, their strategies, their focus, their progress. Rewards for process. We created a math game that rewarded effort, strategies, and progress. The kids played far longer on that game and persevered in the face of challenge and tried more strategies than the standard math game that just rewarded right answers. The language we use, my whole TED Talk is on the word yet. If a child says, I'm not good at math yet, I can't do this yet, it puts it into a whole growth mindset framework. Struggle. Struggle in our society is a bad word. How many of you talk about the wonderful struggles you have all the time? How many of you come home at the end of the day and say, honey, I've had a fabulous struggle? Why isn't that something great? I worked with a large Silicon Valley organization to talk about that felt they were being stifled by the culture, the fixed mindset culture of genius around them. And they started talking struggle among each other on a daily basis and found that it unleashed their innovation, their brainstorming, their creativity. Mistakes. Many classrooms now have begun creating a culture where mistakes are interesting, fascinating. One teacher was showing us film clips the other day of how her kids were vying, begging to have their mistake put on the board so the class could analyze it. Isn't that fantastic? And finally, we can teach a growth mindset directly. We teach kids that every time they do something hard and stick to it, the neurons in their brain form new, stronger connections, and over time, they can get smarter. We show them how to apply this to their schoolwork. And in one study with 7th graders, many of whom were already showing declining grades, we found that kids who learned just study skills without the growth mindset continued to show declining grades. But those who learned study skills with the growth mindset showed a sharp rebound in their grades. Students who learn a growth mindset, adults who learn a growth mindset, say it works for them because it transforms the meaning of effort and difficulty. In a fixed mindset, effort and difficulty, they tell us, meant that they were dumb. After all, if you had ability, you wouldn't have to try so hard. This wouldn't be hard for you. But in a growth mindset, that's when the neurons are firing and connecting, and you're getting smarter. So I'll stop there and hand the microphone over to my partner of the evening.
Thank you. As Janine said, I'm a landscape person. I describe myself as a landscape person. But I'm really an Americanist. And in that sense, I'm not an apologist for America, but I'm someone who has spent a lifetime trying to figure out how and why this country works and how I got to be who I am in it and how we are all part of this country. And in as much as I think about America, I think about the larger planet. And I've always loved Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's Little Prince imagery. I, too, am a pilot. That's me on the left. I have a little tiny aircraft that looks like this. It's about 600 pounds. Looks like a cartoon, but it's actually very capable. I can fly about 1,000 miles in a day. And we take the doors off, and that's my assistant, Ben, on the right-hand side, and my giant camera around my neck on the left-hand side, large format camera. And yeah, I started flying when I was very young, at about age 14. And then went off to college and art school and dropped it. And then about 10 years ago, was able to do a Hollywood consulting deal, and that paid for my little tiny bird, which is named Zoe, which is Greek for life, because I do not want to go down in flames in Zoe. So she and I have a pretty great bargain. Anyhow, I'm also a bookmaker. And I have, I don't know, 19 editions of my published works out across the planet in various languages. But I also make big, giant, handmade books. That's me with one such book. They're 36 inches high by 44 inches wide, and they tend to be of my aerial works. So it's really, I'm fascinated about America, about the planet, but really interested in issues of scale and the sublime. And the scale of these books really kind of relates to the kind of texture and scale of the images themselves. Just to start with the big book that got me famous, it was actually not a handmade book like the others, but a published book called Full Moon. Around 1997, I decided that the Apollo Lunar Photographic Archive might be more than Buzz Aldrin and the American flag, and I went in and I discovered there were 33,000 images, and we knew about 10 of them, and did this book, which was published in 8 languages, and a big show at SF MoMA in the Hayward in London. And it was a great and amazing journey that lasted about 5 years, and I was, these are obviously images that I did not make. These are made by the Apollo astronauts. But as an explorer and a photographer and a landscape photographer, I wanted to get as close to this world as I possibly could, and that was via the photographic archive, because I was not going to be an astronaut. There were many, many amazing things in this archive, and I won't talk about this project very long, but one of the fun things about archival work is you go in and you think you know what you're going to find. Okay, a lot of pictures of the moon and things like Earthrise, but actually, strange things come up. We all know the Earthrise pictures, and of course we know the whole Earth ad nauseum. We don't even see it anymore. It's probably the most famous image known to humanity. And we know the Earthrises in color, but this, I actually sort of, if you will, discovered this image. This was the first Earthrise seen and photographed by human eyes, and Bill Anders had the black and white camera in his hand when they came around in the command module, and he shot these first few images in black and white. Things like that are very gratifying to a little mouse in a dark room going on for years and years. But the unexpected comes up, and it was a great journey. Unfortunately, that's a little bit of a blurry image, but I did these composite pans, gosh, in exhibition they were about 4 feet high by 16 feet long. It was really a fun ride. From there, publishers, it was a very successful project, both in the art world and also in the popular world. And publishers would say, "What's next, Mars?" And I would say, "No, not Mars." I'm not a space person per se, but one thing kind of led to another, and there was a lot of dreaming in the shower and singing in the shower, and what on earth am I going to follow up Full Moon with? And it kind of emerged that archivally, the thing to follow it up with would be a meditation on the atomic bomb. Both projects being an examination of what we do as humans on the planet. They're also both American projects, but 100 Suns was a much darker project, obviously, and it's comprised of 100 images of nuclear atmospheric tests that we did actually entirely before I was born. I was actually born on August 5th, 1963, which was the very day that America and the rest of the world signed the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and testing happily went underground, vastly reducing radioactive fallout and so forth. But underground tests are not able to be seen. There's nothing to look at. So this particular archive is very, very useful and very important because it actually shows us what these things looked like. There's a lot of dark humor in this work. It's a kind of a group of fleur du mal, if you will. They all have names. The tests were given names by the military. This is called, rather appallingly, Climax. This is Mohawk, Wish You Were Here. And these are all just in the National Archives. But on a more serious note, and in landscape terms, it was really fascinating for me to learn, and I think also I took on and take on these projects as a layperson to learn, to understand. This is incredibly complicated science and technology. How does a hydrogen bomb work? How does a nuclear bomb work? How do we go to the moon? And in these projects, I learn for myself, and then hopefully I'm able to translate something for an audience. One of the things that I learned as a landscape person that was so fascinating was in 1952, of course, we know in 1945, we detonated the fission bomb, J. Robert Oppenheimer, where the atom was split. 7 years later, the atoms were brought together in a fusion situation to create the hydrogen bomb. And a hydrogen bomb operates on exactly the same principles as the sun or any other star. It just has less hydrogen, less fuel. So essentially what we have in 1952 is that moment in human history where humans, tool-bearing humans, are igniting their own stars. And in the landscape level, that's a very important thing, because at that moment in time, we become architects of our own sublime. Before that moment, the sublime revolved around big, giant forces of nature that were out of human control, or the divine. In 1952, symbolically and somewhat literally, we become architects of our own sublime. Now, obviously, this work functions on many, many other levels than just that landscape take, but it was really exciting for me. This is indeed the first H-bomb. It's terrifyingly titled by the US military Mike, M-I-K-E. And I mean, you know, this is more detonative power in a single moment than all the ordnance let loose in both world wars combined. 4 seconds after detonation, that fireball is 5 miles wide. It went up to something like 175,000 feet, and so on and so forth. Lots of superlatives. It was fun to kind of go after the fact to Bikini and Eniwetok atolls. As a photographer, these are images that I've made. That's the crater left by the Mike bomb. And that was a lot of fun, because when you're in an archive, you didn't make the images, but if you spend enough time in the archive, it becomes, you have a very possessive sense. So I really wanted to go to this actual landscape and work there. This is the inside of the photographic bunker where the US military filmed and did their still images of these great big H-bomb tests. It's highly radioactive, and I did not wear a lead swimsuit, but I'm not planning on having children. So. At around this time, I started doing aerial work, and I was able to get the plane. This is one of 3 books that I've done in a series on the American West titled Some Dry Space, and this first book was titled LA Day, LA Night. And it's Los Angeles by day, very, very high-key images, very kind of a monstrous look at LA in some ways, but quite beautiful. Trying to, again, wrap my head around the scale of Los Angeles. It's a very, very large human creation. That image was recently shown at the Getty in a big traveling show. Classic, kind of iconic highway shot. And the book was actually double-sided. It had 2 spines connected by a common board. So there was the day side and the night side. This work I did about a year later. Very, very different in vibe, floating at night with a helicopter over LA, very dreamy. And essentially it moves from a kind of loose representation you can see downtown in the distance there near the horizon to, over maybe 12 images, full-on abstraction where looking down becomes a metaphor for the night sky vaulting above, and each light becomes a kind of celestial star. Around the same time, slightly after I did LA, and I also want to say that the LA day work followed hard after the 100 Suns work. So in a way, I was looking with the LA day work directly into the sun, breaking all those classic kind of photographic rules that Ansel Adams would have my head on a platter for. This book, it's called Being a Mine, Garfield Stack, examines the world's largest human excavation, which, surprising enough, is only 20 miles outside of Salt Lake City. Being a Mine is a copper mine. It was funded by the Guggenheims long ago, same Guggenheims that are responsible for the Guggenheim Museum, and I, in fact, applied for my Guggenheim Fellowship with this work, rather deliciously enjoying the irony. But obviously you have, so it's a giant hole in the ground. It's 3 miles wide. It's a mile deep. And it's a kind of city in reverse. It's an architecture of subtraction. And you know, all this kind of work is just incredibly fun to throw yourself in the middle of and try and figure out, okay, how do I create meaning? This is a subsidiary gold mine, quite sexual in connotation, and these are the tailings from the same mine, looking for all the world like a kind of modern glacier. Third book, and I have 2 minutes left here, is just recently published. This is called Lake Las Vegas, Black Mountain, and it's work that I've done over Las Vegas, but over residential Las Vegas, not at all the Strip. And it's a kind of a complicated object form, beautiful sculpture, which I won't go into, but it's drawing a connection between mining and, you know, the imagery that one would find in, say, the Bingham mine work, and the mining industry and the habitation industry. This is a development called Ascaya that was carved out of the massive mountain on the southern side of Vegas. But that slip is interesting because Vegas and Phoenix are very much the children, in my mind, of LA, post-war children, in terms of the way they're laid out and so forth. So all the way over the left there, tiny little white dot, that's a mattress. So these are cul-de-sacs that will be built on, but it's a housing development that's been completely cut out of the mountain and then put on ice. But that's a mattress. Somebody was jumping the gun there, and I hope it was a fun night in a pickup truck or something like that. But kind of mourning in America, our tract home lives, but also having fun with landscape composition and how we live on the earth. And it's very easy to talk about these developments. The book really deals with two particular developments that are in extraordinarily bad taste, as much of Las Vegas is, but actually the work is about more than just laughing at bad taste. It's about, although, you know, I can't resist, there is the Ponte Vecchio up there. This is called Lake Las Vegas. It's a little much. But it's aspirational home ownership and the American dream, and you know, Las Vegas is us. And this image here really kind of brings it home. On the left, you have a home that's, you know, has the mortgage being paid, and on the right, the pool is dead, the windows are boarded up, it's toast. So there's a political element to my work, and I try and engage with the darker elements, if you will, in who we are and what we do. But I'm always thinking about the sublime. It kind of keeps me going. This is Meteor Crater in Arizona, recent work in my little aircraft. About 40,000 years old, the largest and best preserved meteoritic impact on the planet. So on that note, I will thank you for listening.
Trying to think about where to begin. I'm thinking about nuclear detonations and mansions in Las Vegas and struggle. But I think struggle's a good, you know what, I'm so glad you said struggle's a good place, because that's actually where we'll begin. Because Carol mentioned struggle, and Mike, you mentioned this idea of taking on projects where you find something unexpected. And Carol, you also mentioned sticking with something. So to me, these all sort of skirt around the issue of how we characterize creativity. So first, I would love to hear from you a little bit more about how those fit into creativity and how you characterize creativity.
I think of creativity as seeing things in a new light, taking things a step further than they've been taken, finding new uses and or ways of doing things. And I think of it as a process, not the end state, but this process where you trust where you're going. You trust that you'll eventually get somewhere interesting if you take on something difficult, stick to it, go with it.
And that trust is often blind, and
Yes.
and you have to have a base level of comfort with being terrified. I mean, in all seriousness, it's a funny thing to say, but it's true.
I agree with that.
Are there moments, Mike, where you in your work have felt that tear? Is that part of the sublime for you?
All the time.
Can you tell us about
All
some
the
of
time.
that?
Well, I mean, as you can see, I have a taste for the big, right? So, and part of it is I like meta themes, but also part of it is the sort of the concept of dreaming big, right? And also not trying to educate myself in big ways. It's these are big aspects that I'm trying to understand that I don't understand, and so you throw yourself in the middle of a project. You don't know how it's going to come out. You're out of your mind. You're taking on the moon and Apollo. You're going to take on the bomb. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a layperson, and you persevere, and you don't know how it's going to work out, and you have to be possessed, and you have to trust. And sometimes that trust is a blind faith trust.
And it can take you somewhere you don't want to be. It could take me somewhere where I disagree with my friends and colleagues in print. Or I take on something so new that people in my field may not believe it at first. It may be hard for my students to publish at first because it's new and different. But there's no choice. You have to go where the process takes you.
Right, and the particular project you're working can take one on a personal level to an unpleasant place. I mean, I'm really glad I did 100 Suns. I guess I spent 2 or 3 years on it, but I was really glad when I finished it. I wanted to walk the dog and, trim the roses. It's a dark subject, worthy, but I don't want to be in the middle of that work for too much longer.
I'd like to think a little bit more about this idea of process, and I really enjoyed hearing what you said about being somebody who is a layperson who's learning new things constantly through his work. And Carol, your book has a moment where you talk about the best teachers are the teachers who are also learners. So I'd love to think about the role that learning plays in your process and also in your work.
I feel like I'm constantly learning, and that's what makes it all so exciting. I read a lot of everything, and I take on new ideas all the time to research. So, and when you get your results back, you learn things that you didn't know before. So that's part of it. And then, as a teacher, so teachers usually think, okay, I teach, but great teachers are fascinated by the learning process, and great teachers feel that every student has something to teach me. And the most difficult students have the most to teach you about the learning process, about being a teacher.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this feels like the inside of my creative mind, this conversation.
That's why we're all here.
It's amazing. But yeah, I mean, you have to, I wouldn't do it. Making art is really hard. It's much easier to clean the house or sell real estate or whatever. I wouldn't do it unless I was learning and learning again and again. And it's definitely a process fueled by doubt, by uncertainty, by throwing myself into the unknown, kind of literally. I mean, I'm in this little tiny plane and, okay, well, how does Vegas tick? Not the Strip, but why is Nevada like California dream on the cheap? What's that about? And what in the Las Vegas model is so appealing? Because it's actually working for a lot of people. It's the fastest growing city in this country for 2 or 3 decades. What is that about? I don't understand. And maybe my pictures help me to understand. Everything has its limitations, but I get a lot out, but I don't know what I'm going to get before I do it. And it's that unknown that, it makes it fun, but you've got to stay cool, and sometimes you think you're nuts, and, sometimes you go up a dead end.
And if you want to keep learning, you have to question yourself all the time. You have to say, do I still agree with myself? Do I still agree with what I said 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago? If I think of research that will challenge what I've learned before, I will do it. So there's that kind of adventure, that danger, and it's growth.
Both of you, when we talked on the phone preparing for this talk, both of you talked about your love for questioning, a process of constant questioning. Is there any more that you'd like to share about questioning and the role that plays in creativity for both of you, for each of you?
Well, I would say on from my side here, you want to release, I'm speaking from the perspective of being a maker, if you will. I want to release my my wild creator, if you will, and that can be a very organic and messy process, and in general, I try and let it loose enough so that I start making work, I would describe it, beyond my mind, beyond what I'm thinking, like beyond the pictures I think I'm supposed to make. I might make those pictures. If I'm up for an hour shoot, I make the pictures that I think I should make in the first 10 minutes. And then the good stuff comes later, after I almost get beyond my conscious mind. Okay, so you release this wild process of investigation. At a certain point, you have to come back as a maker, as a tough editor, as a tough, does this make the grade? Is this a good picture? How does this fit here and there? And it's that critical mind that, you can't really, you have to have peace and harmony and détente between the critical mind and the wild mind. But you do need both. So, yeah.
That was great. I feel that I give myself permission to question everything and to think anything. And I think critical to that is growing up in a country where, at least in the past, everything seemed possible. I'm growing up in a subculture that valued questioning. Nothing was off limits for thinking. I think that's absolutely critical. And I think also, personally, I'm blessed with feeling that as I'm creating something, boy, this is really good. Then later I can come back with that critical mind and say, no, 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 it isn't, and it needs this, that, and the other. But at the moment of creation, it feels like something good. And I think a lot of people stop themselves in that early process because the early process is never that great or rarely that great. And if you cut things off there, you'll never get to that
That's
and
really
stay.
important. Yeah, that it's a kind of a timing, a sequencing. If you can create a space to really just let loose and innovate, which is hard to do and messy, before you criticize, then and also if you can also create some sort of a situation where you enjoy it. You know, child, adult, it doesn't really matter.
So it sounds like we're talking about a period of openness and risk-taking, maybe a little bit of danger, followed by this moment of self-reflection or self-criticism. And I know that, how many of you here are teachers? Okay, so we have a lot of teachers. We do call this the creative classroom. So we have a lot of teachers in the room. So I'd like to think about how we can cultivate as educators these kinds of conditions in a classroom. What practically can these educators do, or parents or coaches, to help create an environment where these types of things are fostered?
I think in many classrooms, students feel judged. They feel that they're going to produce some work, the teacher's going to judge it, and they're going to feel smart or dumb at the end. And I think we'd all agree that those are not ideal incubator conditions. But if we support kids in some inquiry process, you know, we give them feedback, we can guide them, but it's their process. We support their hard work, we support the strategies they try, we appreciate their progress, but we let them have ideas and take ideas places. We're not judging, we're facilitators rather than judges.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, you know, just on a personal level, I'm 51 and I've been working as a career professional visual artist now, well, 22 years or so, and have had you know, a great deal of satisfying successes, more than I would have hoped for starting out. But then the older you get, the more you have to come to terms with, oh, well, the world expects me to do this, and I better do it really well, and you're fighting, you know, I don't want to repeat myself, and it's, you know, am I going to be judged? And it's very interesting because students in, you know, undergraduate students in art schools are much more free than I am, by definition. They're less accomplished, quote unquote, but I envy their freedom sometimes. And one of the things, I mean, it's kind of a, I'm Rennie Pritikin, our wonderful curator here at the museum, who's somewhat responsible for me being here, is perhaps going to chuckle or hold me to the fire on this, but I'm going to mention the evil word in the art world, Burning Man. And Burning Man, for me, I think you all know about Burning Man, was immensely liberating because it was a playpen of non-judgment where everyone's an artist and where the feedback was immediate and positive and everyone could do anything. And I was actually able to do totally non-photographic things, you know, LED sculpture, hanging from helium balloons, and all this crazy stuff that I would never do in my serious museum-certified, gallery, white box certified life. And it was nourishing in the extreme. And it brought me back to, you know, like true play. And I think as the child moves into adulthood, if they can hang on to play one way or another, then they're going to be creative for the rest of their days. But it's hard to do.
Before I open it up to audience questions, do the two of you have any questions you'd like to ask each other?
What's your next project?
I hate that question. No, my next project is actually getting the book into warehouses. It should have arrived in October, and we're looking at late January now. I have a few things going. I'd like to do some more archival work. I need to make 2 more books in this some dry space American West series for a total of 5, and it'll be a series. But I wanted to ask you a question, and that is, fear. So as a young person, were you fearless, or did you have to work on this?
I was always fearless in my mind. My mind was always fearless. I'm kind of a weenie when it comes to physical risk. I'm not fearless. I'm not sure I'd fly Zoe.
Understood. Most sensible people wouldn't.
I was always fearless in my mind, but this relates to something you said a moment ago. After I had early success, then I went to do my next project that led to the mindsets, and I experienced tremendous fear because I knew I was going to a place that might undermine that success.
Right.
That might not be well received.
Right.
That maybe was a little wacky.
Right.
And I did experience tremendous fear at that time, but again I felt I have no choice. I have to go where this is taking me.
Right, right.
I just want to thank both of you for sharing your work. It's been so interesting having you paired together because there are so many connections and parallels that are apparent, but also that we can draw. So thank you.